So this is from the bass player for the band The Reason, who are awesome. So this is Ronson from The
Yeah.
Reason. He says, Jake's a great dude and a great drummer. I love his flipped tom and was inspired by his path to sobriety some years back. Hope he's doing well.
Huh.
So during the pandemic, people that are isolated, it hasn't been good for mental health.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, people are resorting to drugs, to alcohol, some suicide even.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that it gets talked about. We spent 45 minutes with Rich Beto of Finger 11. He was talking about his addiction and recovery, and it was very important. Are you open to talking just a little bit about your journey of
Yeah.
how it came to be that alcohol was so prominent, and then
Yeah.
how you're able to, how you're able to have your recovery and what life looks like now, and kind of the difference between the two, maybe.
Absolutely. Okay. Let me preface this by saying if anyone is using any substance, legal or illegal, and if you're doing so in a way that is safe, I'm all for it. I would be the last person in the world to say, like, don't drink, don't do drugs, don't smoke cigarettes, especially if you're the Beatles. They looked really cool while they were smoking cigarettes, like we talked about earlier. But jokes aside, again, into the realm of slightly political, in my opinion, all drugs should be legalized and controlled. We should look at addiction as a health issue, not a legal issue. That's the preface. I have a lot of friends that are what you would consider heavy drinkers. I have friends who are drug users. I have zero monicum of my heart or soul or mind that judges anyone for what they choose to do with their own body, whether it has to do with drug use or not. Okay, that is a preface. How alcohol became so prevalent. You're 18, you start playing in a band, and initially it's sort of a vibe of like, okay, money wise, we're getting paid enough money to put gas in the tank, and that's it. But there's also a whole case of beer backstage. You literally do not have money at points in time on the road to eat a proper meal. So I would eat like bags of salted peanuts and have 4 beers, and like, okay, you feel full. Also, years later, and I'll get to this as well, I kind of realized that a lot of what I was feeling, a lot of the negative feelings I was feeling in my life stemmed from really intense social anxiety and other forms of anxiety disorder as well. So putting that aside for a second, you put all this together in a pressure cooker and rinse and repeat for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. And all of a sudden, it can really easily get to a point where you've got something that you think you have a handle on and you don't actually have a handle on it. And I really have to credit Menno, and I really have to credit Royal Mountain Records, the label that he started that Hollerado was on. It still is, like, our back catalog is on. We're still, like a part of that sort of quote unquote family. He started something that was like, he called it a mental health fund or something like that. And it allowed musicians in any of the bands on the label to access a little bit of money to go to therapy. And I literally used that money to talk with a therapist who his kind of specialty was addictions. And really, that was what got me to a point of like health and sobriety, and again, realizing, getting to the root cause of why you're doing things that even at the time you go like, I don't want to be doing this. Like, what the hell am I doing? I don't even want to be doing this anymore. This like sitting in front of a TV, watching the same Simpsons episode that's on reruns in whatever hotel room, drinking like 2 bottles of wine just because it's like habitual, or like at home, not on tour, at home. And you're just like, I'm just going to drink like 3 or 4 beers every night just because it's something that you do. You sort of think of it as a habit, but there's underlying causes to that habit. And the other thing that I would say is, if anyone has elements of their life that they want to drastically change, if you're anything like me, you'll realize really quickly that is in and of itself a job that you have to kind of look at as a job. So if you don't exercise at all and you want to start exercising, it's like, okay, you've just added a job. And maybe this is the way I process things. Maybe this is just the way I think of things. Or if you eat in a certain way and you want to drastically change your diet, then you've got yourself a job. If you want to take care of your mental health, if you've never done that, then you should look at that as a task to be completed, just like you'd look at brushing your teeth, just as you look at bathing or showering, just as you look at like doing laundry, paying your rent, all these things that are necessary for life. If you want to make a lifestyle change, then you need to realize that it takes work to do that. It's not purely gonna happen because you make a good, healthy decision. It's sort of, I don't know whether this is before we were recording or after, but at some point you mentioned the notion of sacrificing something for something else. And, when you're a kid, you kind of realize, oh, if I stay up too late watching TV or, I was a nerdy kid. So if I stay up too late reading like the second Lord of the Rings book, then I'm going to be tired the next day for school. Like you realize, you sacrifice one thing for another, and sometimes that sacrifice is worth it and sometimes it's not. And when you have something in your life, when it's becoming not worth it anymore, then you got to make a change, right? So I don't know, that's about as rambly as I can get.
When you think back to the person you were at the peak of drinking and who you are today, can you see a huge difference?
Yeah, because now, yes, but the initial reaction to things is still there. The initial reaction to things that makes you sad or pissed off or anxious or whatever is still there. So fundamentally, that spark that would be like, oh man, forget this, go, right? All the same things still annoy me, but you learn how to go, okay, why exactly is that? And like ultimately, okay, whatever your flavor of spirituality is, that's cool. I'm not a religious person at all, but a lot of the AA type exercises are super valid and helpful. And really like, okay, the one that's just basically, I'm feeling resentment. What am I feeling resentment towards? I'm feeling resentment towards this person or this thing. And a lot of it's about yourself. Ultimately, I feel resentment of myself. Okay, that's the thing that I'm feeling resentment towards. What does that affect? What categories of my life does that affect? Does that affect my personal relationships, my sexual relationships, my finances, my ability to do my job, whatever? Like you kind of go through these categories. Okay, that affects, my romantic relationship or my relationship to my own spirituality or whatever. You figure out what's the thing, how's it affecting me? And then the third column is really interesting. It's like, okay, how am I involved in the cause of this? How am I actually kind of at fault in terms of the root cause of this thing that's pissing me off? Oh, when you start digging into that, you realize like, especially if you are like, I am a privileged white male cisgender heterosexual person, you realize really quickly, if you go through these kind of categories, you get to that one, you realize, oh, a lot of my problems, at least to some degree, are self-inflicted. Okay, well, that's interesting. And you kind of just like ruminate on that. And then you sort of finish with, okay, well, where do I kind of go from here? And if you actually tackle your problems that way, rather than being like, wow, this thing's pissing me off, I want to stew in how pissed off I am, and I want to just like feel that for hours and hours and hours, and I want to let it ruin my whole entire day, then it doesn't matter whether you are a user of illicit drugs or someone who drinks or somebody who like every single day you binge eat junk food, which like also I love binge eating junk food from time to time, or whether you're somebody that has an addiction to online shopping, or whether you're a workaholic, like whatever your flavor of addiction is, if you don't get to a point of just learning how to like basically a more complex version of sitting down and counting to 10, if you don't figure that out, then you're going to suffer. Or at least that's the truth for me. I mean, maybe, I don't know, like maybe there are people who are less less emotionally driven than I have a tendency to be, and that must be nice.
I think that's all great advice. I think that's probably going to be helpful to a lot of our listeners. We're down to the final two questions. These are some deep questions. Are you ready for the final two?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the first one is, when you look back on your life and career, what are you most proud of and most grateful for?
Relationships, people that I'm still friends with, that I've been friends with for a long time. I mean, there have been a lot of really fun experiences, but I think ultimately, this might sound weird, but having a really good relationship with my parents, and that's not like it's a huge achievement. Tons of people have great relationships with their families, but just having a good, like, healthy relationship with my mom and dad, I think it's really awesome. I think I've had that, or some version of that, for a long time. They're great people, and I love spending time with them. But I think for me, it's so much more relationship based than any sort of like achievement. And I think I don't know about successful people, but I think if you talk to happy people who come across as legitimately happy, I think that's probably some version of that is what they would tell you.
Yeah, there's a study. It's the longest study ever of humans. Like, they started studying people when they were kids all the way through to, some of them are 100 years old. Like, it's several generations of people running the study. It's gone so long that it has to keep getting passed down to new people doing the study. And it shows that the number one predictor of longevity in life comes down to relationships. So all the people that are 90, 100, they all have amazing relationships that make life worth living. So it's like the will to live is there because of the relationships. Whereas those that don't have great relationships, there's less reason to live, but it's also, there's less help if it's needed. If someone is suffering, they're suffering in silence, which leads maybe to more drugs or suicide. So it shows that kind of the secret sauce to living a good life and living a long life does come down to relationships. So there's a lot of truth in what you're saying about your parents.
I think that's huge. Yeah. Final question with the
final question. Are you ready for this? So if we're going to go science fiction for a second here. If there was a time machine and you could go back in time and you could sit down next to your 10-year-old self. So there's cute little Jake sitting there. If you could whisper some words of advice, you've had a lifetime of experience, of highs and lows, of triumphs and failures, of addiction and recovery, of personal growth, mentorship, lessons. What simple advice can you pass on to little Jake to help him through?
I mean, I think my first inclination is to say something along the lines of like, dude, just try and relax. But I wouldn't listen,
Hey, buddy, just take it easy.
Chill. Jesus. Can you stop talking and just get a full night's sleep? Which is what my parents were saying to me every single day at that point in my life. Man, I don't know. I mean, like, other than the obvious jokes of like, hey, borrow $100 from someone and put it into Apple stock.
Bitcoin.
Geez, I don't know. I'm pretty happy with how things have turned out and how they're continuing to go. I think I would be too worried to mess anything up,
Yeah, you've also, we've gone about 2 hours and 40 minutes because there was lots to unpack here. You've also given a ton of great advice over the course of this interview. So, I mean, our listeners already got all that great advice that you might have given to your 10-year-old self. It's like you've already shared that. So maybe you just don't want to repeat a lot of the great lessons you've already shared,
I think I would just want to give them like a high five,
You rock.
Yeah, just like a proverbial high five, depending on, right. I guess there wasn't COVID at that point in time. It's such a confusing.
Yeah, but maybe you can bring COVID back in time if you have it now. Yeah. Who knows? You got to be careful with the whole time space continuum. But
that's it. Yeah, that's it. Right, the butterfly effect.